Welcome back to the NeuroMarvels show, where we are going to talk about what we intend to talk about today.
But that's not fair. I cut right to the segue there. Boom! It's not fair.
It's not. I mean, it's more like a punch.
That was a punch, yeah. But this idea, and when we were talking to each other before, when we first logged in today, I was using the word justice, and I was like, "Oh, that doesn't quite fit." Although it's an aspect of it. And you said fairness. I'm like, "Oh, that nails it."
Yeah.
I can remember if I had $1 for every time as a kid I said that's not fair.
That's not fair.
I would be living in the south of France somewhere, on the beach in my yacht.
Ooh, you'd be on the water, Dina?
Oh, 100%.
No, not me.
Really?
I think I drowned in a past life. Yeah. If I were to be in the south of France, I would be like on a countryside in a little village with a home that had an amazing kitchen. I'd be
That'd be good too. Yeah.
I dream about, could I work remotely from a different country?
Yeah. I watch the Tour de France every year. I'm kind of addicted to it. And
so is my husband.
So why I love it is seeing all those little villages. And yeah. It's not fair that I can't live there. But going back to the topic, right?
Yeah.
This sense of like, and I still remember. So, okay, little backfill. When I had my first vet tech job, I was there for 3.5 years, I think. And there was some kind of upheaval there. One of the doctors left, and I actually followed him to the place where he was. And so I, being me, told my current boss I wanted to be as fair as possible. I said, I'll give you 3 months notice so you can get another tech in. I'll fully train them. And I really did mean that from my heart. I'm not disparaging this place. I'm going to train them as well as I can so that you're in good shape when I leave. And 3 days later, he called me into his office and gave me my last paycheck and had me turn my keys in. And I was like, what the hell? Because I had been so diligent and so putting all of myself into that place, which is what my work ethic had been growing up, and still is. And I remember going to a therapy session that night and saying, it's not fair. And my therapist saying, life isn't fair. And I was really mad at her for saying that. What's interesting about that is just the it's not fair thing kind of pissed me off. I talked to my dad later that night, who worked in the corporate world, and told him what happened. And he gave me an explanation. He said, that's actually really common in the corporate world because they are worried that if you are leaving and you're leaving, that you're ripe for spreading ill will about the place. And it leaves them open sort of logistically and litigation wise if you're there knowing you're leaving. And other employees know you're leaving and it gets kind of sketchy and weird. And that made sense to me. I was like, oh, okay, I wish that they would have explained that to me when he was taking my keys. And the worst part about that is I gave him my keys and I drove half an hour home and I had given him my apartment key and I had to go back. Yeah, it's a trauma memory. I need like EMDR. But
I can do a session for you later.
The unfairness of it, I was so fixated on just getting the it's not fair wasn't enough. And I heard that a million times as a kid, life isn't fair, life isn't fair, life isn't fair. When really what I wanted was an explanation. And I think that's what we get stuck on. You'll hear this idea of unfairness or unjustness goes so deep, and we have such a hard time with it. Neurodivergent folks do. And I think it especially happens when there's no explanation for it, or you can't find a logical explanation for it. I'm thinking of several years ago with the George Floyd murder, and I made myself watch the entire 9-minute tape because I thought this is a seminal moment, and as a privileged white person, I need to watch this. And I watched it, and I think part of me was thinking, not logically, I wasn't consciously thinking this. I think part of me was thinking that there'll be something in this that makes me feel there's an explanation for this. and the tape ended, and I was just like, what the F? There's no explanation for that other than, this was a systemic racism power differential thing that I subsequently learned a lot more about during that whole period of time that I hadn't known on a fundamental level prior to that. So it was a growth opportunity, which is awesome, which is a whole nother episode. But for the longest time, me and my wife were just like, how is this? How did this happen? How is this happening? How is this happening? There was nothing that felt like it could contain it to make sense. And it was just anxiety provoking, right? And it's not that you can't go those layers out and find that it makes sense. It's not always like makes you feel better. When I learn more about systemic racism on that basic level, I'm like, this is crazy. I mean, and I would say effed up. I'll try to not have you write it down and meter me. I'm like, oh, there, that's the explanation. It totally sucks. This is terrible. We live in a world. And I never say this is just a little scratch anymore. Why is this happening now? This is a big topic, right?
Yeah.
I don't have efficacy as a single person to stop that in that moment, right? And then looking at all the layers of what had happened there, like all these people that were videotaping. At first I was like, why didn't one of them stop them? Because they didn't want to get shot, because that's a thing. They didn't want to have someone kill them, because it's a thing. Like all these layers that started to click into place. And then this empathy around what people like you that have visible differences and different racial differences. I was like, oh my God. If you're open to learning those whys, it's better, because you're not getting stuck on the fairness, the black and white, like little kids. It's either black or it's white, because we know the world doesn't work that way. And as you develop, we really resist the grays, because we really want the black or white still. But there's relief and there's explanation in the grays. It may not be what you want, but understanding exists in the grays. And now you have more tools in your bucket. Now you don't just have a screwdriver and a hammer. Now you have a saw, and you have a router, and you have all these other tools that you can do all these really nuanced things with, right? So you're more skilled with it. That's what I invite students, clients, and myself too, when I'm in that place of this isn't fair. It feels like it's just I'm out of control, like something has happened and I have no efficacy, and it's distressing, right? It's anxiety provoking. Lots of those situations happen when you're a little kid, because your parents control your world and there's only so much you can do. And then you can get into the magical thinking of, well, I can drive really carefully. I'll never get in an accident. Someone else could hit you. It could always happen, right? So that sense of explanation, what I can and cannot control. But I have found that the cure for fairness that we get stuck on is making yourself open to the nuances of the grays of explanation, because you'll grow as a person, and it'll make the world feel less random. It'll make more sense to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My first thought, Dana, when people hear, well, life isn't fair, babe, is that it's diminishing and dismissive. And so usually it's done in that way. And we just know that when you're able to feel heard and understood, you can get to understanding. But it's not until you feel heard or understood that you can get to that place. You need to turn the emotional volume down. And because to get to understanding, you need to use just that upper brain, right? And that upper brain is not even going to be accessible if I'm still pissed off, is all I'm going to, right? Like, it's not going to happen. And so even for little children, just reflecting, like, I see you're mad.
Yeah.
Like, you're mad. You're frustrated. You're mad. You did not get what you wanted. Let's just sit with that for a moment and allow, and this applies to adults as well. I mean, how many times are adults so disconnected from their feelings? I mean, I really feel like I statements, and people who know me, I'll always say, like, I statements would be a panacea for the world if people could use an I statement. For those of you that
Mhm.
don't know what an I statement is your statement of your feeling connected to the situation, and then
Mhm.
usually followed up by a request, right? When
Yep.
you threw away my stuff without permission, I felt angry. Please don't do
Yeah.
that again.
Yeah.
That alone, from a communication standpoint, from a relational standpoint, is so powerful. But I
Yeah,
think
versus
that,
you throw my stuff out and just that's where it
right,
ends.
or get passive aggressive, you absolutely need more Diet Coke. The
Right.
but I think the fairness that I experience, hear about from my clients, is that they didn't even take the time to understand my perspective.
Right, right.
They didn't take the time to understand where I'm coming from,
Mhm.
that there was something that was unfair or unjust that happened to me.
Yeah. Yep, yep, yep.
And until that is seen,
Yeah.
I am not going to be able to get to the cognitive ideas of what else could be happening, right? That's a question we ask in therapy a lot. What else could it be?
Yeah, yeah,
What else, right? What else? What else?
yeah.
What if it could turn out good? Like our anxious
Yeah.
people. What if this? What if this? Bad, bad, bad A, bad B, bad C, bad three.
Right,
Right?
right, right,
It's like,
right, right,
but
right.
what if it works out?
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't ever think about that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, and that, I think, in the context of our neurodivergent folks, life feels unfair. And so
And
all
really the
these,
life is unfair is actually
yes,
kinda true.
it's true.
Right?
It's
Yeah.
not, this world isn't really built for neurodivergence.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not, and it's
Mhm.
unfriendly.
Mhm.
And then this is why I say, if you need to go out into the wild, you equip yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
How often do you need to go out there? How
Yep,
long do you need to stay out there? How,
yep.
right? And you see this more from a difference of like, this, here's my home base, my safe home base. I go
Yeah,
out into the world, and I know that might sound a little bit adversarial, but it helps my clients resource themselves
yeah.
enough so that they can go into the world and come back and not have both their knees cut off from, underneath them.
Yeah, 'cause
And then take,
you know that out there things are gonna happen that you can't control. So at
yeah.
least have that home base that's safe. Yeah, yeah.
Right, right, and establish
Mhm.
those pieces. So that unfairness is really interesting. The other
Yeah.
piece too that I think when we talk about unfairness is that there are systemic
Mhm.
factors at play.
Yep.
We often talk about it from a biomedical model.
Mhm, mhm.
That's a systemic thing, right? The way that
Yep,
we have to pathologize people in order for them to
yep,
get any help. That's systemic.
yep,
Racism, systemic. I don't
yep.
care what is happening out there in the world. You
The
actually just
anti-woke
have to
movement.
you just
Yep.
have to be actually a person of color. And I don't even feel like I get my culture, my ethnicity, probably, we probably got the brunt of it during COVID, in
Oh
this, well,
god,
maybe
yeah.
this
Yeah,
last
yeah,
round,
yeah.
but you never, all you need to do is walk into a place and have double takes of looks,
Yeah.
or, these
Yeah.
types
Oh,
of things
yeah.
that
Yeah.
are just different, or choices.
Yep.
Where do we go to travel? Well, there are choices. We don't just
Yeah.
travel anywhere. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
got to kind of think about some of those
Yeah,
things,
if you get stuck in the but I should be able to do that. Okay, then
No,
you're gonna stay stuck in that versus this
right.
is what's really out there now. What choices can you make to empower yourself? Yeah.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
it's not, it's changing, it's picking who you surround yourself with. It's
Mhm.
making
Mhm.
deliberate choices about your environments.
Yep.
It's when you do have to go out there, and that just is that is what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that
Unfortunately.
radical
Yep.
acceptance too,
Yep. That's
that
right.
we often
That's right.
talk about in therapy. There are some things we have to radically accept
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not changeable. And if we
Yep.
don't accept those things will continually feel unfair for us.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, I think about I have a lot of examples from work. My wife does too about being super diligent, maybe doing more than our fair share of work and so on, and then just getting mad at the people that don't.
Yeah.
Also, not understanding why they don't, because like, doesn't everybody have the same crazy work ethic? Probably not so healthy work ethic. Um, And then you could just get stuck in that it's not fair, they're not doing their share, et cetera, versus just saying, well, that's their thing. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because it makes me feel X, Y, or Z. And I have to kind of that's not the hill I'm going to die on, or something like you said. It is what it is. You have to kind of accept that. And again, it doesn't mean just bend over backwards and, let the world do whatever they want to you. It means that if you just get stuck on whether it's fair or not, it can really leave you in a loop of just cycling and not in a good place. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that old 12 steps, focus on what you can control and let go of the rest. And it's sage wisdom.
Yes, exactly.
It really is. There's so many things in the world that are not fair. I think in my life, my daughter just had tryouts for her hockey team. And, this is a good example of you can put in all the hard work.
Yep.
But unless your talent and skill is what that team needs, you're not going to be on that team.
Yeah.
And that's, those are the difficult things. Like sometimes hard work is not. Do we love hard work as an ethic? Yes.
Yeah.
We love
it. Doesn't always get you. Yeah.
It doesn't always get you what you want. And that good old adage, I mean, I grew up that way, right, Dana? You just got to work hard. You just got to it's a very ableist kind of thing.
Pull yourself up by the bootstraps. You can do anything if you work hard enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Working hard is important, and feeling like you put in your best effort is important. That's not a guarantee.
And it's not, it's a little bit of a vacuum. Like, there are other people that have a lot more leg ups, the straight, white, rich man isn't having to get the double takes like you do when they walk into wherever. So there isn't that piece of it that they're having to deal with. All these implicit biases towards acceptance for that person that you don't have, et cetera, et cetera. So you can work as hard as you want. You're going to face those real barriers, and or something like that's just not the position. They weren't looking for someone in this position of the skills that you have. I think that's why looking for jobs, I mean, I sort of see that as a job thing, like interviewing for a job. You don't get all the jobs. It doesn't mean you suck or you're horrible. It means it wasn't a fit for that particular thing, but it's so hard. Like that doesn't feel fair, right?
Right. Yeah. And if you call that out, the idea of implicit bias is that it's happening without your conscientious or conscious knowledge. Right. And so this is what's a real tricky. And I don't think Dana and I don't think we're trying to get political here in any way, shape, or form. We're talking about the psychology of things, and that even in grad school for us, we evaluate our implicit biases and what we bring to the profession because they exist.
Yeah.
They exist culturally, they exist societally, they exist socially, they exist within our families. That is what it is. That's how humans work. It's how humans also try to understand the world. They use frameworks to understand the world. That's why we have generalizations and stereotypes. And we could get into this all day long. There is no question, though, that there are these systems that exist.
And then you do what you can, i.e. like this podcast. We do this because we're trying to do our part to change the narrative. Are we reaching every single person in the world? No, of course not. But we're doing what we can. So you figure out ways that you can afford some difference or have an impact on certain people or whatever it is. But those are kind of hard pills to swallow if you're looking at the overall picture, because you do have to let go of some bad stuff, right? It wasn't fair that Iron Man died. Oh crap, I probably just ruined that for everybody. But
spoiler alert.
Hopefully by now everybody's seen that series, but
it's on you. It's on you if you haven't seen it.
It's on me.
And Dana just spoiled it for you. I'm so sorry, but that movie came out.
I'm still convinced they're going to bring him back with an alternate timeline anyway, but life isn't fair, but that's the reality. It's more real that way.
Yeah. Wow. Aren't we we're just bringing the positivity this morning.
There is a positive part to this though, because I think if you let go of that everything should be fair, it's a little bit liberating, right?
It is liberating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It is liberating. It's liberating in so many ways, but you do have to. Your mind does have to get there. And this is a mind thing, people. Like, this is the thinking thing. This is a cognitive thing.
Yep.
This only exists in our narratives.
Yeah.
And so to impact, it's a belief system. So this is not easy to impact because people are very attached to their belief systems. So
it's a hard one to shift. Yeah,
it's really, really hard. Wow. So unfairness. It's almost unfair that our podcast or this episode's coming to an end.
Yeah. Well, there's a perfect segue. You're so good at that.
You're better. You're really better at it. If I just lob you a ball, you're like, I just like you just spike it. That's what Dana did. I just lobbed her a nice, easy ball, and she was like, that's it.
I know. That's a neurodivergent brain. I can connect two dots in any way possible. I can make it fit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll come to you when I need to rationalize something. All right. Okay. On that note, everybody, we will see you and catch you in the next episode. Be good to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.